Good afternoon, Frank.
Good afternoon, Professor.
As usual, we have to say that the world keeps getting more and more exciting. It's amazing how much has happened in this past week. But there are two things in particular that I felt we should talk about today. One is, of course, the fact that before we talk next time, Scotland will have finished its referendum and decided whether or not it's going to stay in the United Kingdom. And there have been a lot of interesting discussions about that over the past week that I think we have some interesting things to say about. But apart from that, I have been noticing something that I should have noticed a long time ago. And in a way I have noticed it a long time ago, but it is becoming clearer to me now that most of the time when we talk about globalization, we have our eyes on the wrong things. And it's partly because of what Mrs. Thatcher said in 1980, whenever it was, when she said there's no such thing as society, and which Ronald Reagan, I think, I can't find the actual words he used, but I think he agreed with, that individualism had got to the point where we knew what individuals were, but society was too vague a term, and it really didn't mean anything to talk about society. But I think that we are all social animals, and by not talking about society, we've been missing a lot that's going on. So we focus all the time on the Islamic State, what the Kurds are doing, what Assad is doing, what particular people are doing, what particular groups of people are doing, all the things that are wrong, all the things that are right, and so on. But we have no sense generally in the media or in our intellectual discussions of why everything happens the way it happens when it happens. And I've always said that these are really social problems, and they happen when they happen simply because things are going on socially as a result of population growth that's brought us to a particular point at a particular time. And the rate of population growth is different in different parts of the world, and certainly has been varying differently in different parts of the world over the last 50 years when we've begun to have all these problems. But I think that one can go further than that and say that what in fact takes our attention is the acts, but what actually lies behind them are the social variables that we really don't pay attention to, even in our censuses. Because we know about population growth, but we focus on more on global population than we do even on national populations. And we don't pay any attention to the way population growth varies, or in trying to understand why it grows differently in different places at different times. And that's been a problem for a long time, ever since the population bomb that was written in the late 60s, and the time that neon sign in Times Square that shows you the rate at which the population is growing.
Right.
A lot of money was offered by funding agencies then for the study of population growth. But nothing really interesting came out of it to explain just why population growth is changing all the time. It goes up and down. It goes up and down differently in different places. And I think that we can, to some extent, offer explanations of this, but it's not been done yet, and it would take a lot of work to do it properly. It's difficult to explain why fertility rates go up and down, and the fact it's difficult to explain why they're coming down in the Middle East now, for example, at a different time from when they came down in Italy and Russia and various other places. But I think it's possible to do that. And but even more important than that is that even we know population rates are important, but we don't pay any attention at all to the degree to which people interact more when the population does grow. We're so impressed by Darwin, and we know that natural selection is important, but we don't use that to explain why we can't stop fighting all the time. But we forget that Darwin talked about cooperation as well, and we don't do anything to try to explain why rates of cooperation change. And what's been happening in the world recently is the fact that not only has population been growing, although the rate at which it's growing is declining, the numbers of people interacting has been increasing, partly because of technology, partly because our rates of innovation have been increasing, even though population growth has been declining. And that's what underlies all these exciting things that keep happening between our weekly meetings.
Well, can you give me a for instance? I mean, take the for example, the Scottish desire for independence, supposedly. How does the social variable of population change impact that?
Well, I think that the level of awareness throughout the United Kingdom, with some exceptions, there are pockets where there is not so much awareness, and usually that's in immigrant populations that have formed enclaves. But generally throughout the United Kingdom, the level of awareness is much higher of what's going on throughout the United Kingdom now than it ever was before, simply because there's so much more interaction throughout the whole of the population. Mm-hmm. And that makes people much more concerned to be developers of opinion rather than just doing what is being decided somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So this is the first time in 300 years that it has mattered to the Scots that they're not part of the decision making that goes on in Westminster. I wondered why nobody actually decided that, since what happened in 1701 or 1707 or whenever it was that the Scottish king took over England, why somebody didn't suggest that we move the capital of the United Kingdom to Glasgow, mm-hmm. or somewhere. You'd think that would be an obvious thing for people to suggest. I'm not saying that it to happen, but it's obviously something that would correct the imbalance that was begun 300 years ago, in a sense. Mm-hmm. But you can see that there are these social variables underlying everything that's happening. Mm-hmm. And the same way in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. All these places where there is a lot more trouble now than there's ever been before are places where there's much more interaction over larger areas than there ever has been before. And in fact, it's been the rate of increase in the size of these arenas of interaction has been much greater in the Middle East than here. I mean, the idea that people in Syria and people in Iraq would all do things together,
right,
would never have happened before.
Right. And underpinning this is the increase in population.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been possible if population hadn't grown up to a certain point. Mm-hmm. But now population has grown to the point where the size of the arenas of interaction can continue to increase, even if population doesn't grow anymore. Mm-hmm. Because the increasing interaction has allowed us to innovate more, so that we're connecting remotely irrespective of distance.
Right.
And so what's happening now is that there's this continuous swirling in the world economy, that a lot happens in one place for a while, and then people move to another place and a lot happens there. It'll never be completely homogeneous, but it'll always be one global arena of possibilities.
Right. No, and you're right, of course, because economically, even what seems to be a very small event far, far away can impact the New York stock market, for example.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. So, of course, if population continues to expand as it's forecasted to do, this means what?
Well, population is predicted to reach a new plateau sometime in the next 50 years or sometime before the end of this century. But by that time, there'll be so many people that it won't matter that population doesn't grow anymore. Because what's happening at the same time now is that the movement of population is increasing. And it's movement of population that is playing the same part as population growth played before. The fact that as people move around, as well as interacting remotely, more and more people all the time who don't know each other and have different experience, and learn, therefore hear new things from each other, are coming into contact with each other.
So if you took a situation, for example, like the desire of ISIS to restructure the caliphate, and we apply this theorem to that, we're talking about A, the fact that there are many more people in the area, B, the fact that these many more people in the area are in contact with each other more frequently than, say, 50 years ago, and C, the planting of an idea, which is traditional in memory and institutional memory from way back when, is something that can catch wildfire very quickly and begin then to respond to events caused by the West, in this case the United States and whomever else.
And heads of state don't have the respect anymore they used to have. So, I mean, I don't think the Islamic State will last very long because people will get fed up with that sort of leadership as well pretty soon. But it's nobody's worried about shifting their attention from the government in Baghdad or the government in Damascus or in Riyadh to the Islamic State. And this is another reason, I think, why there's interest in having Scotland as a separate state, because why should London always be the center of everything for people who don't happen to live in London?
Right, and the odd thing about the United Kingdom is it's not at all unusual to find people, even after a 100-mile drive out of London, to find people who have never been to London.
Yeah.
In fact, it's sometimes normal. That's interesting. I must ask you, I mean, this is a very good theory to use. And what did you think of the president's speech last evening?
Well, I'm glad I'm not in his shoes, because I wouldn't like to have. Did you hear Dick Cheney's speech today?
I didn't hear his today. I heard his 2 days ago when he.
Oh, was it 2 days ago? Maybe
he spoke to the Republican conference and he advocated reinvading Iraq.
Yeah. I mean, Obama's problem is that he's got to he has to try to say something that will satisfy a whole range of different types of people, and it's impossible. However, I think that he probably has to try to make America appear still to be the strongest player in the game. But he's not going to not many more presidents are going to be able to keep that up. And America has to try to work out another way to use its capabilities, because what we've proved to ourselves over the last decade is that force doesn't achieve anything.
No, it doesn't seem to. And it's most unfortunate as a U.S. taxpayer, considering this government spends more than the collective spend of the next 8 biggest defense spending countries on its defense bill. So if it doesn't prove anything, why don't we use that money for something else?
And we desperately need it to mend our bridges and repair our roads and so on. Apart from looking after our cities, which are falling apart, looking after the poor, running the health program.
I was very surprised in the United Kingdom when that most recent poll came out last Friday, showing the secession or independence vote was really creeping up, and in fact had drawn equal. And then immediately, Miliband, Cameron, and Clegg just decamped to Scotland. They canceled the question time, and all three went up there. And then there was even talk that the Queen herself was going to go up there.
I wonder what she's going to do with Balmoral if Scotland is Scotland going to stay in the Commonwealth? That's not been. Um,
I saw some comment attributed to her. I'm sure it was not attributed to her, that she would look forward to welcoming them as a Commonwealth member. So, and then today the stories are out in the business section about the Scottish banks have now publicly said they're all going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this could be a very big thing.
Well, but it will be no if Scotland votes to leave, and if it does, it'll almost certainly be by a narrow margin. There's going to be a lot of argument about it, and years of difficulty about what belongs to each country.
Right, right.
Especially since the populations are so unequal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's, I think, the beginning of the sort of thing that's going to happen more and more. And institutions like RBS, and I think Lloyd's is
yes.
Are going to have to work out strategies for this. I mean, already I think there's a lot of multinationals that keep on changing their ideas about where their base should be because of the changing politics of particular nation states and tax systems and so on. But I think what's going to happen is that all big corporations that are in some sense transnational will have to work out a new form of organization that gives them a number of different bases in different political territories. And this will be the beginning of that.
Well, as you pointed out at the beginning, once again, the United Kingdom leads the way. So we can all watch and learn.
Okay.
All right. Well, Professor, on that note, thank you very much.
Right.
All right.